In the bustling heart of the city, amidst the daily grind and endless distractions, there lies a tale of unexpected love and second chances. For too long, I had wandered through life, feeling as if a piece of my heart was missing, a piece that belonged to a woman I once cherished deeply. Just when I had almost given up hope, she returned, more vibrant and captivating than ever. With the whispers of fate guiding me, I found myself standing on the brink of a decision that could change everything. In the company of my wise friend Mandy, I felt a surge of courage and determination bubbling within me. It was time to reclaim what was once lost and to embrace the opportunity for love that had presented itself once more. I've never encountered such pathetic lovers in my life, and yet my wife managed to find one of them. I used to think that infidelity stemmed from feelings of passion, desire, and excitement. But now, I realize my wife's betrayal was nothing more than a cold calculation for her own gain. It's a pity, really, that all her efforts were in vain because I had been plotting my move long before this. Growing up, one evening my parents rented All the President's Men. Watching Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein unravel the mysteries of the White House ignited a fire in me. I was inspired to pursue a career in journalism. The idea of becoming a dedicated reporter and challenging the corrupt establishment filled me with ambition. I set my sights on the prestigious Columbia University School of Journalism, determined to make my mark. Through a combination of good grades, a scholarship, and a substantial student loan, I managed to gain admission. Columbia became the foundation for my future, offering me three invaluable gifts: a top-notch education, a reasonable chance at securing an entry-level job in the media industry after graduation, and the opportunity to find a wonderful partner in life. Let me elaborate on each of these gifts. Columbia is renowned as one of the nation's leading journalism schools, imparting not just the basics of research, reporting, and writing news stories, but also the essential techniques of investigative journalism, broadcast reporting, and digital media. I learned from seasoned journalists who were actively working in the field, as well as esteemed professors who brought their expertise into the classroom. However, one thing they didn't prepare me for was the brutal reality of navigating the fiercely competitive journalism job market. The oversupply of reporters, editors, and media professionals, coupled with the steep decline of the industry, especially in newspapers, created a daunting landscape. Securing a job became a challenge, and even when I managed to land one, the compensation was typically disheartening. As graduation approached, my desperation led me to consider accepting an unpaid internship just to gain experience. But just when I thought I was out of options, a connection came through for me. A family friend, a Columbia alumnus, offered me a position as an assistant copy editor and fact-checker at a newspaper in the Washington, D.C. area. While it wasn't the glamorous career path I had envisioned, I seized the opportunity like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. One of the driving forces behind my frantic job search was the fact that, amid my classes and reporting assignments, I had managed to fall deeply in love. In fact, I had taken the significant step of getting engaged during my senior year. Nicole, my fiancée, was studying political science, and we had first crossed paths in a comparative politics class during our junior year. She possessed a unique blend of intelligence, eloquence, ambition, and stunning beauty. What began as a simple friendship blossomed into a profound emotional connection, intensified by late-night debates and discussions about politics. We couldn't seem to get enough of each other. Soon, we realized our aspirations extended beyond our college years. Unlike me, Nikki had her future meticulously planned. A congressman from her hometown, serving his third term, was a close friend of her family. He assured them that upon her graduation, she would secure a position as an aide in his Washington office. This gave me hope, as my own job prospects in D.C. felt like a stroke of luck. After we graduated, we tied the knot, but despite both being employed, we could only afford a modest walk-up apartment in Bethesda. It was far from luxurious, but in the glow of youth and love, such inconveniences felt trivial. Nikki enthusiastically immersed herself in the workings of Capitol Hill, thriving in her new environment. Meanwhile, I was grateful for my job, but I found my duties somewhat unfulfilling. Correcting others' writing felt far removed from my dreams of becoming an investigative journalist. Still, I reassured myself that it was better than being unemployed, and that this position could potentially open doors to more fulfilling opportunities. As it turned out, I was right, but not in the way I had anticipated. One afternoon, I was summoned to my boss's office and seated in a rigid wooden chair facing his desk. His scrutinizing gaze made me uneasy. Eventually, he presented a document that I recognized as my resume. "It states here that you possess writing skills. Is that accurate?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied sincerely. "I also have a solid academic background." "Correct?" he pressed further. "Well, I did graduate with honors," I said modestly, though I didn't want to boast. He sighed heavily. "Here's the situation. Agatha Cornwell is retiring next week, and someone needs to take over her column. That someone is you." I gulped nervously. Agatha Cornwell was not exactly a daring journalist. In fact, she didn't even qualify as a journalist. She penned a daily advice column for the paper that most of the staff hardly ever read, and when they did, it was met with ridicule. The thought of being tasked with writing that column felt like the worst job imaginable, worse even than writing obituaries. My boss seemed to mistake my stunned silence for eagerness. "Now, don't get your hopes up. The truth is, the column has one of the lowest readerships in the paper, but it does have a small, loyal following, so the managing editor doesn't want to scrap it." I felt a mix of frustration and resignation wash over me. I had come to Columbia to uncover the truth, to expose the powerful, and now I was being assigned to write an advice column? The irony was not lost on me, but I knew I had to make the best of the situation. As I took a deep breath and prepared myself to embrace this new challenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to take a turn I never saw coming. Little did I know that the skills I would hone writing about love and relationships would eventually lead me back to the very betrayal that had fueled my drive in the first place. As I sat in the dimly lit office, the weight of my new assignment pressed heavily on my shoulders. "Keep it under wraps so that you're the new Aunt Agatha," my editor had instructed, his eyes boring into me with a mix of seriousness and concern. I nodded, fully understanding the implications of his words. The last thing I wanted was for anyone in my circle to discover that I had taken on the task of writing an advice column. If the news got out, I'd be the laughingstock of the Columbia School of Journalism, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. His penetrating gaze seemed to say, "Don't mess this up." I assured him I wouldn't, then exited his office, feeling a mixture of dread and resignation. How would I ever face Nikki and our friends if they found out? I lamented my predicament as I returned to my desk. An advice column? It felt beneath me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to become the subject of ridicule. The only silver lining was that, due to my boss's orders, I couldn't disclose my new role, which offered a meager sense of comfort. Wonderful, I thought gloomily. Not only do I have the most thankless job at the paper, but I can't even vent about it. When I got home that evening, Nikki immediately noticed my glum demeanor. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I quickly fabricated a story about a tough day at work. Thankfully, she didn't press further, too eager to share her own exciting news about her job. "Guess what? My new boss is making waves in political circles," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Timothy Vickers is rising fast in his party. He's young, charismatic, and incredibly articulate. People are already speculating about his future. Some think he could be vice presidential material." Her excitement was palpable, and I forced a smile, though inside I couldn't shake my own feelings of inadequacy. While I genuinely wanted to be happy for her, my mind was still consumed with the humiliating thought of my new assignment. Monday morning arrived, and I was directed to my new workspace. To my surprise, I discovered that I actually had a small office to call my own. A small consolation for accepting what felt like a demeaning job. As I settled behind the battered wooden desk, however, I was immediately overwhelmed by the chaos that surrounded me. Papers and letters were strewn everywhere, and I felt completely lost, unsure of where to begin. Just then, a soft knock interrupted my thoughts. A young woman about my age peeked in with a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm Mandy. I'm here to assist you, she said cheerfully. An assistant? I blinked in surprise. I had my own office and an assistant. Perhaps this situation wouldn't be as dreadful as I had anticipated. Hello, Mandy, I replied, relief flooding over me. I'm Casey, and I'm completely at a loss here. Please come in and enlighten me about what's going on. With a bright smile, she settled into the small chair next to my desk and began chatting. It didn't take long for me to learn that Mandy had only joined Agatha's team 3 months prior and wasn't particularly enthusiastic about her role at first. It's not exactly hard-hitting journalism, she admitted with a hint of resignation, but it grows on you. There's a sense of fulfillment in helping people who are desperate for guidance. She handed me a stack of Agatha's recent columns to peruse, and as I read through them, I quickly formed a mental image of a kind-hearted elderly woman diligently offering nuggets of wisdom to her audience. Mandy then displayed a selection of letters that poured in daily. However, as I skimmed through the inquiries, I couldn't help but notice they were uniformly mundane and somewhat uninteresting. Curious, I turned to Mandy. "Why are these so dull?" I asked, a smile creeping onto my face. She winked playfully and handed me another batch of letters. These are the questions Agatha chose not to address. She was pretty uncomfortable discussing certain topics, especially the ones she deemed odd or inappropriate. As I delved into the contents of the second stack, I quickly realized that we had a considerable number of eccentric and risque readers reaching out for advice. Turning to Mandy, I remarked with a grin, "While I may not be an expert in this field, I assure you we won't be dodging inquiries about naughty subjects any longer. That's exactly the kind of content people are interested in, and we're going to deliver." Mandy's expression shifted to one of concern. "I'm on board with that, but I'm not sure how management will react. They've gotten used to a more conservative approach for quite some time, if you catch my drift." "Listen," I said, trying to sound confident. "I didn't seek out this assignment, but now that it's mine, I intend to handle it my way. If the boss isn't happy with that, they can find someone else. Are you with me?" She smiled brightly. "All right, count me in." Fortunately, Agatha had prepared her columns in advance, giving me a small backlog to work with. This allowed me the time I needed to review the letters from the Do Not Answer file and select a few for my first column. I thought carefully about the tone I wanted to adopt, aiming for responses that reflected my beliefs but also injected with a bit of attitude. After several attempts, I felt confident enough to share excerpts of my initial draft with Mandy for feedback. "Dear Aunt Agatha, I'm in a dilemma. I adore my wife, but I've recently come to terms with my bisexuality. I want to explore this side of me with other men. As long as I don't engage with other women, I don't see it as infidelity. What's your take, switch hitter?" "Dear switch hitter," I continued, "regardless of which side of the plate you swing from, it's still a breach of trust in your marriage. Dear Aunt Agatha, my husband and I have had a blissful 10 years together, but I recently strayed with a colleague. I'm consumed with guilt. Should I come clean and beg for forgiveness?" "Dear remorseful Roberta," I wrote, "confessing may alleviate your guilt, but it shifts the burden onto your husband. Keep it to yourself and demonstrate your remorse through actions, not words. The guilt serves as a reminder of your wrongdoing." Dear Aunt Agatha, a married coworker sent me an inappropriate photo. With each inquiry I tackled, I began to feel a sense of excitement. This wasn't just an assignment. It was an opportunity to connect with people in a real way. Maybe, just maybe, this new chapter would turn out to be more than I had ever anticipated. "What should I do, gross out?" "Dear gross out," Mandy teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Why not just forward the message to his wife and see what she thinks? I'm sure she'll have a strong opinion on the matter." Her suggestion hung in the air, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. Mandy glanced at me, her grin widening. "I'm not sure how management will react, but they can't say your column is dull anymore." As expected, later that afternoon my boss barged into my office, waving the column I had submitted like it was on fire. "What on earth do you think you're doing, Casey?" he bellowed, clearly agitated. Aunt Agatha's readers are a bunch of delicate old ladies. You're going to upset them with this kind of content. I stood my ground. You tasked me with a job and I completed it. Why not give it a chance before you dismiss it outright? His frustration was palpable as he snorted and stormed out. Yet, in the end, he begrudgingly allowed the column to be published alongside the print edition. Our paper also had an online version, providing instant feedback from readers. Despite Mandy's earlier claim that Ask Aunt Agatha rarely elicited much response, I was shocked when she came by my office the next day, excitement bubbling over as she pulled up the online feedback for my column on my computer. It appeared that my debut had stirred up quite a reaction. While some readers criticized Aunt Agatha for being flippant about serious issues, others applauded her bold stances. I hadn't expected such a strong response, and honestly, I felt apprehensive about the polarized reactions I had incited. However, Mandy seemed positively thrilled. "This is the most significant response I've ever seen to an Aunt Agatha column," she exclaimed. Still uncertain, I remarked, "But some of the feedback wasn't favorable. What if they hate what I wrote?" "Who cares?" she shot back cheerfully. "At least you got them thinking." So. In the following days, the reaction to my column continued to reflect the initial mixed response. Comments poured in, both supportive and critical, regarding the new tone and topics I was tackling. I couldn't help but wonder how management would ultimately react to all this buzz. Over the next 2 weeks, I began to answer a question I had pondered when I first started this new job. Why did I need an assistant? As I witnessed the influx of letters and emails, I started to understand. Mandy showed me how to manage the Aunt Agatha email account, and I began to question whether even 2 people could adequately handle the volume. Each letter and email needed to be read, sorted by date, and categorized. Some were earmarked for a response, others discarded, and some set aside for further consideration. We would discuss the ones requiring replies and determine the appropriate responses together. At times, our opinions would differ. For instance, one day, as Mandy burst into laughter while sifting through the mail, she came across a particularly absurd letter. "This one's going straight to the trash," she chuckled. "It's clearly a fake." However, when I read it, I recognized its potential for inclusion in the next day's column. Dear Aunt Agatha, I was recently awoken from a deep slumber by little green men who escorted me to their spaceship and conducted various examinations on my body using alien devices. Yesterday I discovered that I'm pregnant. What should I do? I couldn't help but grin. Dear abducted by aliens, I suggest you take this letter to your creative writing professor and inform them that I've advised they give you an F. That Friday afternoon, just as I finished preparing my column for Monday, my boss unexpectedly appeared at my office door. I had been avoiding him since our last fiery interaction, so his sudden presence put me on edge. "I've received the latest report on our online site's hits," he said, his expression grim. "And I've reviewed the feedback on your column." I held my breath, bracing for his verdict. "They might not always appreciate your sharp remarks," he continued, "but they're certainly reading your content. The hits on Ask Aunt Agatha have increased by 35%. With that, he exited my office, leaving me stunned. It felt reminiscent of that famous actress's Oscar speech. "You like me. You really like me." Mandy, who had been listening in, rushed in to congratulate me with a warm hug. "Congratulations, Casey. These are fantastic results. It's rare for the boss to deliver such news in person. He must be genuinely pleased." Returning her hug, I tried to downplay my excitement, saying, "Oh, it was nothing, really." But inside, I felt a surge of pride. While this may not have been my dream job, at least I was making strides in the one I had. Driving home that evening, my only regret was not being able to share the news with Nikki, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it. When I arrived home, Nikki reminded me of our weekend plans. Her boss, Congressman Vickers, had organized a staff retreat at a wealthy supporters' estate along the river, and partners were invited to join. Due to my background in journalism, I tended to be quite skeptical of most elected officials. When I heard about Congressman Vickers, how the media labeled him as a family values crusader preaching personal morality, I felt uneasy. Consequently, I wasn't particularly excited about mingling with him and his entourage, but Nikki was enthusiastic, so I kept my reservations to myself. Later, when I had the chance to chat with him over drinks, I found him surprisingly charming, albeit earnest. The following day, while Nikki and the other staffers were in a meeting with him, I had the opportunity to meet Mrs. Vickers. My impression of her was even more positive than I expected. I had anticipated encountering a stereotypical rehearsed politician's wife, ready to recite her campaign spiel at a moment's notice. Instead, I met a quiet, reflective woman whose only visible setback was a noticeable limp. Without any prompting, she began to share stories about their lives, her warmth instantly putting me at ease. It turned out that Congressman Vickers wasn't the only one whose public persona was misleading. Just like my column, sometimes what you see. She opened up about the car accident that changed everything for her shortly after their wedding. It was truly devastating, she admitted, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and resilience. I can't have kids now, but I'm just grateful to be alive. I try not to dwell on it. I was struck by her bravery, and I couldn't help but admire her husband's unwavering support. Maybe he really is one of the good ones, I thought to myself. Later that evening, as we settled into our hotel room, Nikki was brimming with energy. "I'm really pleased with your work," she exclaimed, a bright smile lighting up her face. "You have no idea how much I depend on your help. Why don't you come over here and see if you can assist me with something else?" I suggested playfully. Our chemistry ignited, and we soon found ourselves lost in each other, making passionate love. As we drifted off to sleep afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend had turned out to be quite successful. Sunday morning greeted us with sunshine streaming through the patio doors as we sat down to enjoy our breakfast. Nikki, in her usual fashion, had grabbed a copy of the Washington Post, but also picked up a copy of my newspaper as a show of solidarity. I chuckled to myself as I watched her dive into the living section, completely engrossed. "What's the appeal of Aunt Agatha's column?" I asked her, genuinely curious. "I suppose I'm just like everyone else. I enjoy peeking into other people's lives," she replied without hesitation. "Plus, lately Aunt Agatha has been particularly captivating, and her advice is surprisingly insightful." I nearly let slip my secret, struggling to contain my excitement. Wouldn't she be surprised to know that I was the one behind those words? A surge of mischief bubbled within me as I considered the possibilities. The following week, I settled into my new role with increasing comfort, thanks in large part to Mandy, my colleague. Working alongside her was a delight. During our lunch breaks, our conversations revealed many similarities in our backgrounds. Like me, Mandy aspired to be a reporter. However, instead of heading to Columbia, she chose the University of Missouri, which has an excellent journalism program. She, too, faced challenges in securing a reporting job after graduation. Her role as an assistant to Aunt Agatha came about when management realized she needed help with her duties. Together, we began to strategize our column instead of merely reacting to letters as they came in. We started collecting letters based on specific themes, aligning them with current events. Gone were the days of addressing letters about summer romances during the Christmas season. Mandy also excelled in research, sourcing valuable resources for Aunt Agatha to recommend to her readers when they sought expert advice. One day, we received an email from a young reader that struck us as incredibly urgent. It read, "Dear Aunt Agatha, I'm 14 and feeling lost. My friends and I have been inhaling gasoline to get high. At first it seemed okay, but now I'm vomiting and feeling dizzy all the time. I'm scared and don't know what to do. My parents warned that they'd send me away if they caught me using drugs. Please, I need your help. Signed, Alone in Alexandria." How unbelievably foolish can parents be? I fumed, my frustration boiling over as Mandy presented me with the email. Their daughter could be facing serious health issues, and yet they've completely shut down communication with her. Then a chilling thought struck me. What if her condition is critical? "We can't afford to wait for a response in the paper," I urged. "We need to find a way to reach her immediately." Mandy pulled me back to reality. We don't have her phone number or address, and the email she used is likely fake. I refuse to believe there's no way to identify her and locate her, I responded, frustration creeping into my voice. You start researching where she might seek help, and I'll speak with Amir. He might have some insights on how we can reach her. Amir, our resident tech expert, was the best when it came to navigating networks, computers, and the internet. When I found him and explained the situation, he thought for a moment. That's a tricky one, he admitted. Emails often pass through numerous servers, making it nearly impossible to trace the original sender. However, I have a friend at the NSA. If anyone can help, it's them. I encouraged him to offer any assistance he could. Then I went back to check on Mandy's progress. She had found a free clinic in the Alexandria area that specialized in helping teenagers with substance abuse issues. Understanding that locating our 14-year-old reader immediately was improbable, we decided to respond to her email, hoping she would check her inbox and see Aunt Agatha's response. As a precaution, we also published the same response in the newspaper. At that point, all we could do was hope she would come across one of these messages and seek help before it was too late. The next 2 days passed without anything noteworthy happening, and both Mandy and I felt increasingly despondent. Then, out of the blue, everything changed. Amir burst into the room, waving a piece of paper excitedly. "I got it!" he exclaimed. "My friend came through." Barely had he handed me a home email address for a loan when Mandy rushed in, clutching a printout. "I followed your suggestion," she announced breathlessly, and we quickly reviewed the email. "Dear Aunt Agatha, I visited the location you suggested, and they provided significant assistance. I've stopped vomiting and no longer feel dizzy. In fact, I'm improving so much that I'm determined to convince my friends to stop using heroin. Thank you. Not alone in Alexandria." I glanced at Mandy, unsure whether to laugh or cry at this unexpected turn of events. "At least we've made an impact," I said, my voice filled with hope. "Your column is making a difference, even if it's in an unexpected way," Mandy reassured me. A few weeks later, our boss stormed into my office, his usual scowl firmly in place. "I don't know if you're skilled, kid, but you're certainly the luckiest person I know." Having grown accustomed to his unpredictable outbursts, I simply looked up and asked, "All right, what's the issue this time?" "Against all odds, your so-called insignificant column has turned into a sensation. On the surface, doesn't tell the whole story. The news hit me like a freight train. My column was about to go into syndication. My boss explained how significant the attention had been, with readership skyrocketing and other newspapers taking notice. Long story short, once the legal details were sorted out, Ask Aunt Agatha would be featured in numerous papers across the country. I sat there in disbelief, absorbing the gravity of this opportunity. Just then, Mandy walked in and posed the crucial question. What about the financial aspect? My boss, wearing a strained expression, explained his policy. When a writer's work is syndicated, the revenues are split evenly with the paper. If you can maintain this level of performance, you're on track to earn the kind of money usually reserved for the top players in the game. Mandy erupted with excitement, her arms wrapping around me in a tight embrace as we both began yelling and dancing around the office like kids who'd just won a prize. My boss watched us, his expression disapproving but unable to suppress a hint of a smile. Once he left, Mandy planted a congratulatory kiss on my cheek. "Oh, Casey, this is fantastic news. I always knew you had something special in you." I grinned, feeling a rush of gratitude. "We're a team. I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled warmly and kissed me again. "You're kind to say that, but it was your willingness to take risks and shake things up. You're the one who made your mark on the column, and you deserve all the success coming your way." Elation filled me as I made my way home, eager to share the big news with Nikki. However, she arrived home very late, and when she finally did, her focus was entirely on her Congressman boss. It seemed the party was actively seeking a new face for the upcoming convention, and Congressman Clan's name was being circulated as potential vice presidential material. Nikki couldn't stop raving about how amazing he would be as a VP and the prominent role she could play in his campaign. I tried to show interest, but the more she talked, the more I felt like an afterthought in her life. Hey, I quipped, only half joking. Remember me while you're busy making all these grand plans? She waved me off dismissively. You're just a copy editor, she said, her tone light, but her words cutting. He's aiming for the top. He could be president of the United States one day. Seeing my reaction, she quickly backtracked. I mean, I'm sure what you do is valuable for the paper, but let's be real. It's not likely to go down in history. Her words stung, and I turned to leave, feeling a mixture of hurt and anger bubbling up inside. Just as I reached the door, she reached out to stop me, but her phone rang before she could. It was someone from the Congressman's office, and soon she was engrossed in the conversation, leaving me feeling more invisible than ever. I stepped outside for a leisurely stroll around our neighborhood, trying to clear my head. As I walked, I couldn't shake the truth in her statement. If her congressman ascended to the White House, he would undoubtedly gain fame, perhaps even historic recognition. But that didn't justify her dismissive attitude toward me or our relationship. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Nikki's regard for me had noticeably diminished since she became entrenched in the congressman's inner circle. While I understood her dedication to her work, her lack of enthusiasm for our marriage baffled me. Deciding to keep quiet about my syndication plans, I reasoned that it might take months for the deal to materialize, and even then, it wouldn't hold the same allure for Nikki as her boss's vice presidential nomination. When I returned from my walk, Nikki attempted to brush aside the earlier tension, but our interactions had shifted to polite exchanges rather than affectionate ones. Regardless of my discontent with our marriage, I still had a daily column to write. However, it soon became clear that my personal life was beginning to affect my work. Just a few days later, I stumbled upon a hopelessly romantic email in my inbox from someone asking for advice, and in my cynical mood, I decided to respond firmly. Dear Aunt Agatha, I've developed feelings for an amazing man at my workplace. He's intelligent, humorous, caring, and undeniably attractive. The only issue is that he's married. Should I confess my feelings to him? Sincerely, his secret admirer. I quickly drafted my response. Dear secret admirer, listen closely. Keep your emotions to yourself. No matter how genuine your feelings may be, you have no right to interfere in this man's marriage. While he is married, you should refrain from expressing your feelings. If this proves too difficult for you, consider finding a different job. I was prepared for some backlash from the more sentimental members of my audience who wanted to give the secret admirer a chance, but I had reached my limit with outsiders meddling in marriages. Back at home, things continued to worsen. Nikki's job demanded longer hours, and her travel schedule became so hectic that I could only anticipate her return by checking the itinerary she left in the home office. She was constantly away with the congressman for fundraisers and party strategy sessions. When she did come home, she was too exhausted to do much besides eat and sleep, and any intimacy between us became increasingly rare. Adding to the gloom of my married life, things took a downturn at work as well. Mandy, who had always been cheerful and positive, suddenly fell into a melancholy state. It was evident that something troubled her deeply, but despite my efforts to reach out, she refused to confide in me. It struck me as ironic that I could offer help to strangers, but felt powerless to support someone I cared about. As Nikki grew more aloof and Mandy became increasingly despondent, my days morphed into a series of stressful affairs. I found myself struggling to balance my professional life with the turmoil brewing at home. Lately, I had been feeling irritable, snapping at Mandy more often than I cared to admit. Each time I did, regret washed over me like a cold wave, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. Despite my best intentions, my words carried a weight that I didn't fully comprehend until it was too late. One morning, Mandy walked into my office with a somber expression, clutching a letter in her hand. "I'm resigning," she said, handing it to me. "Wait, you can't leave, Mandy," I exclaimed, panic rising in my chest. "I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me and stay. I really rely on you." Her brow furrowed slightly. "What you said didn't upset me, Casey. I knew you didn't intend any harm." "Then please reconsider," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, just stay a little longer." For a brief moment, I saw her hesitate, but then determination overtook her. "I'm sorry, Casey, but I have to leave. It's for the best." Before I could formulate a compelling argument to change her mind, she turned and walked away. A wave of despair crashed over me. Why were all the important women in my life slipping away? That afternoon, I tried reaching out to her at home, hoping to persuade her to reconsider. To my dismay, I discovered that she had moved out, her phone disconnected. Even her cell service was terminated. I asked around, but neither the HR department nor any of her friends had a clue about her whereabouts. Mandy's absence was glaring. I began to understand just how crucial she was to the smooth operation of our small venture. Sure, HR had arranged for a temporary replacement to handle administrative tasks, but the person they sent was utterly useless when it came to decision-making regarding the column. The camaraderie and friendship I had shared with Mandy felt irreplaceable. Frustratingly, something strange distracted me from my worries about Mandy one day. An unsettling email landed in Aunt Agatha's inbox. It read, "Dear Aunt Agatha, my husband is a good man, but I don't see him going places. Meanwhile, I've found myself in a passionate affair with someone who has a promising future ahead. I believe it's time for an upgrade, and I'm seeking advice on how to break the news to my soon-to-be ex. Going for the gold." Initially, I drafted a sarcastic reply and set it aside, planning to send it the following week. But the wording of the email triggered a memory that made me rethink my response. After a moment of reflection, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. "Hey, Amir," I greeted my friend when I bumped into him. "Could your contact at the NSA help trace another message?" "Is it important?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "I don't want to bother him with trivial matters." "If my suspicions are correct, it could be crucial," I replied. A few days later, Amir entered my office, beaming with excitement. "Ask, and you shall receive," he proclaimed dramatically. "My contact uncovered the sender of your mysterious message. It originated from an account in Bethesda." He handed me a slip of paper. "Here's the billing address associated with the account. Does it ring a bell?" As I glanced at the address, realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was my home address. I was astounded by Nikki's foolishness in sending such an email to an advice column. I couldn't fathom why anyone would seek guidance from a complete stranger about their personal life. What's more, I couldn't believe Nikki was involved in an affair with Congressman Clean, or that he was involved with her. He was supposed to be happily married, a man who had built an image centered around family values and morality. Yet here he was, flaunting his hypocrisy by carrying on with my wife during the campaign trail. My fury grew with each passing moment. Was she planning to discard me so callously to upgrade to another man? Whatever happened to the vows of for richer or poorer, forsaking all others? I knew I would likely spiral into a deep depression at some point, but in that moment, all I could feel was a burning desire for revenge. After much contemplation, I reached a decision. My first step was to visit Sam Winston, the newspaper's seasoned chief political writer, who was well-versed in navigating the complexities of Washington. He had been a great help when I first joined the newsroom, guiding me through its workings. "Casey, what brings you here today?" he asked with a friendly smile. "I might have something you'll find interesting this time, Sam," I replied, my voice steady. "How would you react if I could provide you with a story about Congressman Clean's clandestine affair with one of his aides? A story like that could potentially earn us a Pulitzer Prize." Sam's eyes lit up. "A story like that? I'd relish the opportunity to expose the hypocrisy of that sanctimonious politician. But what leads you to believe he's romantically involved with one of his aides?" I met his gaze evenly. "The aide in question happens to be my wife." His surprise was evident, but once he realized I was earnest, he leaned in closer, his expression turning serious. "Let's discuss this further," he said. "Capturing an ordinary adulterer is usually straightforward. They tend to lack creativity and caution. But exposing the misconduct of an elected official? That's a different ballgame. Politicians are used to public scrutiny and can be quite cunning. However, a newspaper has substantial resources at its disposal if it commits to using them. After Sam presented our case to the managing editor, the paper mobilized all available resources for our investigation. Although I wasn't directly involved with the investigative team due to the obvious conflict, I supported Sam's efforts by providing Nikki's daily schedule, suggesting that if he kept an eye on her, he would likely find the congressman not too far behind. As expected, 2 weeks later, Sam entered my office and closed the door behind him. "We've got him," he announced. When I looked at him questioningly, he continued, "Congressman Clean has definitely been involved in inappropriate behavior with your wife." Deep down, I had held on to a sliver of hope that this was all a misunderstanding and that things could still be salvaged. But with each word Sam spoke, that hope began to fade away. Somehow, life had started to return to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, after Sam's revelation, I came to a disheartening realization. Hope was futile. While hope can be incredibly resilient, when it fades, bitterness often takes its place. "When do you plan to take action?" I asked, the heaviness of my situation weighing down my words. "Should I start proceedings for a divorce?" "Don't worry," Sam reassured me. "There's still time. We need more evidence against Congressman Vickers to establish a clear pattern of behavior, not just a one-time occurrence. Plus, we want to time this closer to the nominating convention for maximum impact." I watched as Sam's smile faded, his expression hardening. "I despise hypocrites. When the congressman falls, he'll fall hard." An involuntary shudder ran through me, a twinge of pity rising in my chest for what was about to happen to Nikki. Almost immediately, our already strained marriage became even more distant. Nikki was rarely home, and when she was, our interactions felt more like those of roommates than spouses. It was as if she was oblivious to the growing chasm between us. I suspected her mind was elsewhere, likely focused on someone else. Like Nikki, I found myself spending more and more time at the office. Work became my sole refuge from the pain of our disintegrating relationship. Yet even there, reminders of her infidelity surrounded me, leaving me no respite. I longed to confide in Mandy, to seek her advice and lean on her understanding, but it was as if she had vanished from existence. No one knew her whereabouts or how to reach her. Guilt gnawed at me, making me wonder if my own grumpiness had contributed to her disappearance. In the workplace, I deliberately avoided crossing paths with Sam Winston. Although my curiosity about current events was intense, I reasoned that bothering him with questions would only add to his burdens. But as discussions surrounding Congressman Vickers' potential vice presidential candidacy intensified with the approaching convention, I couldn't help but wonder about the progress of Sam's investigation. Then one Monday, Sam found me and asked me to join him in the conference room. Upon entering, I felt a wave of relief wash over me when he signaled for me to close the door behind me. "Things are about to unfold in the coming days," he informed me. "I'll be staying at the Hay Adams Hotel on Wednesday night, and we plan to confront him Thursday morning. The story will hit the papers Friday morning, and then chaos will ensue." In that moment, I felt an exhilarating sense of relief. My facade of a happy marriage was finally approaching its end, and I could stop pretending to my social circle and family that everything was fine between Nikki and me. "Before you get too carried away," Sam interjected, interrupting my thoughts, "there's something you need to hear. We managed to secure the room adjacent to your wife's. A week ago, we installed some highly sensitive recording devices." He gestured toward the MP3 player on the table before quickly exiting the room. I put the headphones on and braced myself for what I expected would feel like watching a poorly made adult film featuring my wife. However, what I heard was quite different. Sure, there were plenty of scandalous moments, but what struck me most was the congressman's evident insecurity and Nikki's constant attempts to calm him down. At one point, he asked, "I'm much bigger than your husband, aren't I?" To which she responded, her voice dripping with feigned enthusiasm, "Oh yes, you're twice his size." I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Yes, that's right. A confident man would ask about this, I thought. He continued, "Tell me how much better I am than Casey. He never made you feel the way I do, did he?" Nikki eagerly reassured him, "Oh, baby, you're the best thing I've ever had." As I listened, I thought, is this guy really that insecure? But the most revealing moment came later, after what seemed like an agonizingly long build-up to intimacy that clearly consisted solely of her work. As he began, I heard the sounds of infidelity. My ex-wife praised him in a ridiculous manner, pretending to enjoy herself. I recognized the difference in her voice. Sam wouldn't have needed sophisticated listening devices if Nikki had actually found satisfaction in her encounters. At first, I felt a sting of pride in my manhood, knowing that the Congressman was such a pathetic lover. But upon deeper reflection, I felt even worse. Nikki wasn't leaving me because she had found someone who could truly satisfy her. She was leaving because she saw a way to further her own ambitions. She didn't love this man. She wanted to be the First Lady. How could I ever love such a flawed and selfish woman? My indignation surged, and I felt a strange sense of relief knowing my marriage was on the brink of collapse. Just then, Sam returned to the room. "Are you all right?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I nodded, feeling a mix of determination and sadness. "When you confront him on Thursday, will she be with him?" "Most likely," he replied, "if they stick to their usual pattern." "In that case, I want to be present," I informed him. He glanced at me with a concern. "You're not planning anything reckless, are you, Casey? No thoughts of revenge or anything like that?" I shook my head firmly. "Don't worry, Sam. After what I've just heard, she's not worth it. All I want is the satisfaction of personally serving her with divorce papers." He nodded in understanding. "But you have to let me and the photographer do our job first." At 5 p.m., we waited in the wood-paneled lobby of the Hay Adams. The hotel staff, though curious about our presence, recognized Sam as one of the prominent reporters in town, so they didn't bother him. Sam must have received a message through his earpiece because he turned to the photographer and me and announced, "They're coming down." We gathered near the elevators with me positioned at the back. Sam shot me a stern look over his shoulder. "Remember, no aggressive behavior." I responded with a Boy Scout salute. "I promise, Sam." Just then, the elevator doors opened and out stepped Nikki and the Congressman. The flash from the photographer's camera caught them off guard, and I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and I was ready to finally confront the chaos my life had become. The political storm. In the bustling corridors of Capitol Hill, a familiar face emerged amidst the chaos of political discourse: Congressman Timothy Vickers. As he navigated through the throng of reporters, he occasionally acknowledged their presence, but one reporter stood out: Sam, a tenacious journalist known for his incisive questions. "Good morning, Sam. Always a pleasure to see one of our esteemed journalists hard at work. But isn't it a bit early for questions?" Vickers quipped, trying to regain his composure as he adjusted his tie. Undeterred by the congressman's casual dismissal, Sam pressed on. "Congressman Vickers, would you like to comment on why you and your aide were seen leaving her hotel room so early this morning?" I couldn't help but admire Sam's audacity. Vickers, attempting to maintain his poise, stammered, "Well, Sam, Nicole and I just had a brief conversation to review my schedule for the day." "Oh, I see. Then could you explain why that brief discussion started at 11 p.m. last night and continued without interruption until just a few moments ago?" Sam persisted, his voice unwavering. The congressman shifted uncomfortably, visibly struggling to regain control of the situation. Sam, however, wasn't finished. "Perhaps this photo taken earlier this month will help clarify your relationship," he continued, pulling out a striking image that captured the moment both Vickers and his aide were caught in an embrace, high up in a glass-walled elevator outside the Marriott Hotel. The photograph was damning. Vickers' hand was gently resting on Nikki's back, a moment that, while fleeting, was enough for the powerful telephoto lens to capture. "How do you think this will affect your position on family values, Congressman?" Sam continued relentlessly. As the confrontation escalated, Nikki stood nearby in shock, her eyes darting around in confusion. Then they locked onto mine, and she exclaimed, "Casey, what are you doing here?" That was the moment I had been waiting for. I approached her calmly, clutching the divorce petition in my hand. "I've come to personally deliver this to you," I said, handing her the papers. Her expression shifted from shock to disbelief. "Oh," she gasped, staring at the documents. I added, "And just so you know, if you're still curious about Aunt Agatha's question, you'll find the answer in today's newspaper." I handed her the morning paper, open to my column, before turning away.
"Wait!"
I heard her call after me.
How could you?"
I glanced back at her, my heart heavy as I pointed to the opening query in my column. "Dear Aunt Agatha, my husband is a decent man, but his ambitions are limited. Meanwhile, I've found myself in a passionate affair with someone who has promising prospects. Now that an opportunity to upgrade has presented itself, I'm inclined to seize it. Any advice on breaking the news to my soon-to-be ex-husband?" Aunt Agatha reassured the writer that there was no need for concern. Her husband was already aware of the situation and had initiated the separation. I knew some of my readers might find Aunt Agatha's response confusing, but I had written with her intent in mind, and I was confident she understood the message. When Sam's story hit the headlines on Friday morning, it ignited a media frenzy. People were quick to turn on the Congressman, especially when it became clear that he had been preaching family values while engaging in hypocrisy. The initial reports were swiftly followed by the revelation that Congressman Vickers was no longer being considered for his party's vice presidential nomination. Soon after, Vickers' wife appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Network, tearfully recounting her heartbreak as Oprah offered her gentle solace while publicly denouncing her unfaithful husband to millions of viewers. The ensuing divorce proceedings were highly publicized and messy, further tarnishing Vickers' reputation. In a misguided attempt to salvage his political career, the congressman foolishly opted to run for re-election in his district, but he was overwhelmingly defeated and subsequently faded from the political scene. It was a fitting end. His name may have been remembered in history, but it would be forever associated with disgrace. Meanwhile, Nikki found herself the target of tabloid reporters desperate for details about the other woman. In the wake of the scandal, I changed the locks on our apartment, forcing her to temporarily stay with a friend. When the paparazzi became unbearable, she decided to leave town and eventually moved back in with her parents. Our divorce proceeded swiftly. Nikki couldn't contest the allegations of adultery that had been thrust into the public eye. Although she reached out to me a few times, I insisted all communication go through my lawyer, and eventually she stopped trying. We divided our assets evenly, but because the syndication deal was still pending, she didn't receive any of those funds. As my involvement in the expose came to light, I gained a measure of minor fame within the paper. Yet, whenever colleagues began probing with too many questions, my boss would quickly step in to deflect their curiosity. Though he was a stern individual, I grew to appreciate him for his protective instincts. I had anticipated feeling relieved after my divorce from Nikki, but instead, I found myself sinking deeper into a depression. It wasn't her absence that weighed heavily on my heart. Rather, it was the loss of the loving relationship we once shared. I resented her for depriving me of that connection. Despite my attempts to date, each encounter felt repetitive and uninspiring. One day, while wallowing in self-pity at my desk, my thoughts wandered back to Mandy. I felt a pang of remorse for pushing her away. It was a loss for both of us. Recalling an advice letter I had responded to months earlier regarding office romances, I dug through my files until I found it. As I revisited my response, I realized I had been overly critical of the letter's author and wondered how I would approach the same question now. Then, a sudden realization hit me, and I checked the date of the email I had received. Could it be? Hastily, I made my way to Amir's workspace, tightly gripping the note in my hand. "Amir," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. "I know it's a big request, but could you possibly reach out to your NSA contact to check one more email for me? It would mean a great deal." Amir looked at me, surprised but willing to help, and nodded, ready to assist. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was still a chance to make things right. I pleaded reluctantly, handing over the email address. "This better be worth it," he warned, a skeptical look on his face. "Believe me," I insisted, my tone serious. "It's a matter of life or death." When I next encountered him, his expression was troubled. "I'm not sure what game you're playing, Casey," he said, his brow furrowed. "But that email originated right here from the newspaper's offices." I knew it! I exclaimed, enveloping the surprised technician in a tight hug. It had all been Mandy. Of course, she had feelings for me, but she just didn't know how to express them. In that moment, I realized that I had unwittingly pushed her away with my careless words. No wonder she had resigned and left town. What a terrible counselor I had turned out to be. I had someone incredibly special right in front of me, and yet I had failed to recognize it. Not only did I overlook her, but I had actually succeeded in driving her away. I was determined to find her, but every direction I turned seemed to lead to a dead end. Her old friends hadn't heard from her, her Facebook page was inactive, and HR wouldn't grant me access to her job application. However, a helpful clerk discreetly informed me that she hadn't listed any next of kin for me to contact. Even the University of Missouri, where she graduated, had no recent record of her. The weight of my personal struggles began to take a toll on my professional performance. My loneliness and depression, stemming from my failed marriage, combined with the frustration of being unable to find the one person who truly mattered to me, were becoming unbearable. It reached a point where my boss had to intervene. He bluntly told me to snap out of it or risk losing our syndication deal. His words, though harsh, jolted me into action. I realized I needed to refocus and give my job the attention it deserved. I couldn't afford to mess things up, especially considering my previous failures with Aunt Agatha, Nikki, and Mandy. I had developed a genuine affection for Aunt Agatha and her readers, despite my own shortcomings. Suddenly, an idea struck me. It seemed absurd, idealistic, and perhaps futile, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I took a deep breath and began to write. Dear Aunt Agatha, I once worked alongside a woman who embodied everything I ever desired. However, amidst the chaos of my life, I failed to recognize her true worth. Consequently, I allowed her to slip away, and now I am at a loss on how to locate her. What steps can I take to rectify the gravest error of my life? Blind in Bethesda. Dear Blind in Bethesda, your only hope rests on the possibility that one day she will discover your sentiments and grant you another opportunity. Should that day arrive, ensure you seize it and never let her slip away again. I understood how foolish and meaningless this gesture might seem, but I felt compelled to attempt it if only to reassure myself that I had tried. A few days later, I was summoned to the upstairs office. Waiting for me were a couple of lawyers and the managing editor himself. Since I had only met him once before, I felt quite intimidated. However, he quickly made me feel comfortable by explaining that the purpose of the meeting was to sign the contract for syndicating Ask Aunt Agatha. Once I signed the agreement, my daily column would be distributed in newspapers across the country, starting the following week. From that point on, the newspaper and I would split the weekly earnings generated by the deal. To sweeten the pot even further, the managing editor informed me with a smile that the number of newspapers carrying Aunt Agatha had increased from 12 to 22 during the negotiations, with the possibility of even more after 6 months. After signing the papers and exchanging handshakes with everyone present, I walked back to my small office in a daze. For the first time in my life, I had the opportunity to earn a substantial income, provided I could continue providing valuable content. I might not be a groundbreaking journalist like Woodward and Bernstein, but I was making a living in my chosen field, and perhaps even offering some beneficial advice to my readers along the way. I should have been overjoyed, but instead, I found myself longing for someone to share my good news with. After work, I joined a few fellow reporters for a couple of beers, but kept quiet about my achievements. I knew the news would spread eventually, but I didn't want to come across as boastful. Later that evening, I returned home for a quiet night. I did call my parents to share the news, but asked them not to tell anyone. Aunt Agatha's identity was still officially a secret, though I knew the truth would come out eventually. The managing editor had mentioned keeping it under wraps until they were ready to launch a publicity campaign. My parents were thrilled for me, but Mom was disappointed that she couldn't brag to her friends. Dad was still a bit confused about what I did, but he was happy that I seemed financially secure for the foreseeable future. The following day, I was diligently sorting through a fresh pile of letters when a faint knock echoed through the door frame. Initially, I glanced up without spotting anyone. Then a hesitant voice called out, "Casey?" I recognized that voice immediately. "Mandy!" I exclaimed, abandoning my desk in a flurry of papers as I rushed to embrace her. "I thought I'd lost you," I confessed, showering her with kisses as a rush of emotions flooded over me. Eventually, amidst the cacophony of joy in my ears, I glanced up to find my office hallway filled with cheering colleagues. Mandy looked at me sheepishly. "They kind of trailed behind me when I came searching for you," she explained. As the excitement began to subside, my colleagues returned to their workstations, leaving only my boss lingering. He fixed Mandy with a stern gaze. "It's high time you returned," he remarked. "This fool has been useless since you left." As he departed, I felt a mix of relief and happiness wash over me. I hadn't just regained a colleague. I had potentially found the love I had been searching for all along. I leaned closer to Mandy and whispered, "For once, he's absolutely right." "Aunt Agatha," I began, my heart racing with the weight of what I was about to share. "Against all odds, the woman I thought I had lost forever has come back into my life. And I must admit, she's even more incredible than I remember." I paused, feeling the rush of emotions swirling inside me. Memories of laughter, warmth, and connection flooded my mind. "But now," I continued, "what should my next steps be? How do I navigate this unexpected second chance?" Mandy, ever the voice of reason, raised an eyebrow and grinned. "Well, it seems to me that the answer is clear. You need to propose to her." "What?" I exclaimed, caught off guard by her bold suggestion. "You think I should just pop the question without any hesitation?" "Why not?" she replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "You've already lost her once. This time you need to go all in. Don't overthink it. You've got to take the leap." I took a moment to let her words sink in. Mandy was right. Life was too short for indecision. It was time to show the woman I loved just how much she meant to me. "Okay, I'll do it," I said, determination replacing my initial hesitation. "I'll ask her to marry me. But where should I propose?" "Think of something special," Mandy encouraged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Somewhere that reflects your relationship and the journey you've both been on. You could even do it in Bethesda, where so many of your shared memories are." "Bethesda," I mused, a smile creeping onto my face as I pictured the charming streets, the lively cafes, and the parks where we spent countless hours together. It was perfect. With a newfound sense of purpose, I began to plan the perfect proposal. I would make it a moment she would never forget, a testament to our love and the journey that had brought us back together. "Thanks, Mandy," I said, feeling grateful for her support and insight. "I think this just might be the beginning of something truly beautiful."